Hello again. Today I'm here with Campbell Harrison, one of the Australian comp climbers who's climbing World Cups overseas. And I just want to know some things about you and what is it like climbing a World Cup overseas and coming from Australia?
Well, my name is Campbell. I'm 21 years old. I've been climbing for about 13 years almost now, so a little while. And I've been competing internationally since 2012. So my first World Youth Championship was in Singapore in 2012. I guess it kind of took me by surprise a little bit getting into international competition. It wasn't like something that I planned for a really long time. I went to this training camp run by Rob and Carly LeBreton and kind of got me really inspired, but I was so far from what the standard was to make the team then. Like, set my sights to it, and when qualifications came around, I topped almost all the routes and made the team, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, this will be fun. Worked hard, or at least what I kind of thought was required, and then stepped onto the international stage and was like, wow, this is really something. Like, it was definitely attainable. Like, it never felt outside of the realm of possibility, but it was definitely eye-opening to go from Aussie comps to even just the youth B male international youth level, let alone the senior World Cup level.
Yeah. You mentioned this training camp. Like, how was it? Like a training camp? Like, when did you say? Like 2012?
Yeah.
So that's 7 years ago. What did you do in a training camp? Like to take a look who are the chosen ones to represent Australia?
Yeah. Well, Rob and Carly were implementing a new qualification system where rather than selecting like the top athletes in a ranking, it was a set standard that you had to be able to climb, so like a grade. And I don't think the grades were exceptional. I think it was like you had to be able to on-site like 7B plus or something like that at the time. But for where we were as a nation in climbing, like there were categories where no one could on-site those grades, and so if no one could on-site those grades, no one went for that category. And so the training camp was kind of implementing the new selection criteria, and then kind of talking about like the training expectations of being on the team. It was basically just setting you up. Like, if you'd like to go to Worlds this year, this is what's required, and like this is what's changed from past years. Yeah, like I said, I got my ass handed to me, really. I don't know if I didn't top any of the routes, and I think I was one of the only climbers across the whole camp that didn't top any of the qualification routes.
Do you know who was with you there? Like, is someone of this team still around and climbing today?
Roxy Perry was there. Sarah Davis, who's our current national bouldering champion. Emma Horan was there. She was still in youth. Those are probably the big names that I can remember that were still climbing. They were climbing in that camp back then. Lucy Sterling as well. That was her last year of youth as well.
So you mentioned you trained really hard, like because you got your ass kicked at this camp.
Yeah.
And then you started training really hard. How and where did you do this?
So I train at Bayside Rock in Melbourne's southeast suburbs, and the owner of the gym there, James Cassay, had since then has had some pretty successful performances on the World Cup circuit, and had always climbed at a really high standard. And I think he, to a degree, helped me not so much with like directly training for climbing, but like trying really hard and learning to fight on the wall and giving it everything, and like learning how to switch on when you need to. He was like a huge part in that aspect of my development as a climber, providing like the facilities on which I could implement those skills.
Talking about facilities, I think it's really important to mention you're mainly, or like you used to be mainly a lead climber, right? Or lead is your favorite discipline?
Yeah.
But the gym you're training at, is it a lead climbing?
We do have lead climbing. We do have lead, and the lead is good, but
What do you mean with good? Like, maybe we always have to
commercially good. I think the Routesetting is interesting. I think it caters to a big degree of different levels. But as far as preparing for a World Cup, like I'm lucky if at any given time there's an 8A on the wall, and so maybe I can do laps with a weight vest on an 8A and get some kind of semblance of World Cup level training. But for the most part, I do all of my training on a bouldering wall, just because it's more efficient, it's more accessible.
How high are the walls? And how long?
The walls are up to 12 meters tall.
Yeah. So this is already like kind of
Yeah.
Okay, if you train on a 12 meters wall, you will kind of not build the endurance.
Yeah, we have a roof that's maybe like 18 meters long.
Oh.
So it's quite overhanging, and it gives you the length. You can get 40 moves out of it. So it's okay. Like it does. If I feel like at any given day I need to be training on a rope, there's stuff I can do there to make it work. But it's not ideal. Yeah, like I said, much more effective for me to be training on a shorter wall that I can do more with.
Yeah. Could you train lead on an international standard here in Australia? Can you do that just in general?
No, I don't think so. Not on a rope.
You can put a number on it, kind of, right? So you say 8A, 8A plus is too easy. Like, can you say like how hard are the qualification routes on a lead World Cup?
It can really vary because I've had World Cup qualifications which were maybe 8A.
Yeah.
They get a lot of tops though. Otherwise, I'd say on average like 8B, 8B plus for qualifications. It kind of varies because they're pretty relentless. So they don't really stop. So you know, everyone's going to pump out at some stage. But yeah, generally qualifications like 8B, 8B plus.
Yeah, that's cool to know.
Yeah.
Like, for me, because people always ask like how hard are the boulders, and the boulders usually range from 7A to 7C plus. It's just like incredibly tricky, but because of the length and the endurance when it comes to lead, I think it feels like it's easier to put a number on it.
Yeah.
And which is like really interesting.
For sure, and it's the whole pressure of the environment as well. Like I've definitely had World Cup boulders that couldn't be harder than maybe V5, you know. But you have to perform them in the 5 minutes. There's something about them you have to figure out. You have to deal with the pressure of where you are. You know, maybe it's the first boulder out and it's a slab and you've gotten all psyched up, and then you have to relax and step onto the wall and try to flash the boulder, because if you don't flash it, it could be the difference between, you know, starting off in 50th place and starting off in 110th place. You know, it's the pressure that the boulders provide more so than the boulders themselves, I guess. Yeah.
Do you like the pressure?
I think the pressure in lead and boulder is different. I think I do excel in the pressure in lead, having one go, as opposed to having to like fall off, reset, re-establish, try again, like testing new beta, different methods and that sort of thing. Lead, it's kind of like if you're doing the move wrong, it doesn't matter. Like you've got to pull it off, because if you're off, then that's it. I think I really like that pressure.
Can you describe how it was when you first attended a senior lead World Cup? We can talk about these whole circumstances, but I'd also like to know, like, how did you feel coming to a senior World Cup?
I was really panicked by my first senior World Cup was... Oh, actually, no, my first senior World Cup was Munich 2015. And
that was bouldering, right?
Yeah, that was bouldering. And I wasn't actually super nervous for that one. I was just like ready to enjoy the boulders. I ended up rupturing a pulley in the middle of the round and not finishing anyway. But no, for that one I was really relaxed and like ready to give my all, and I didn't have any huge expectations. But my first lead World Cup the following year, I was really anxious about stepping into that one. I had no idea where I would measure up in the field, and even if I'd even be able to kind of pull off the ground on the routes. Like I just had no perception of what the standard was.
Okay, and where was it? And
the first World Cup I did? In the first lead World Cup I did was Chamonix in 2016.
Okay, that's impressive.
And they were hard routes, like for sure some of the harder World Cup routes I've climbed on.
Yeah. If you take a look at nowadays, like how do you feel you measure up? Like, how do you feel comparing to top level athletes? Is it that you're missing power, endurance, or climbing skill, or is it more like a mental side as well?
I guess of course there's a degree of everything. I think nowadays I measure up pretty competitively in a lead World Cup field, bouldering less so, and I've got to work on that, and there's lots of aspects of my climbing that I have to improve. But stepping into a lead World Cup, I feel pretty confident that I can, place in the top half of the field on most given routes. I think power has always been kind of what's lacking for me. finger power. I have a lot of endurance. Like, I think for a guy of my size, I can climb for a long time. And so like that's all just stuff that I've been building on and working on over the last few years, and going over to Europe each year to train on the routes there has been helpful. And experience is obviously a part of it as well. Yeah, I guess like every aspect of my climbing needs to keep building in order to perform better at a World Cup standard.
If you mentioned before that you go over to Europe and train, for example, in Innsbruck, do you train with other elite World Cup specialists together?
Yeah, absolutely. Last year I pretty much lived in Innsbruck for like 3 months, and so I spent a lot of time training with Molly Thompson-Smith from the UK, Jan Hoyer, Claire Burfind. Even beyond the people I was directly training with, there are always World Cup climbers on the routes next to you, like whether you be discussing beta with them or just kind of climbing side by side. Like there's always someone strong in Innsbruck to train with and to learn from.
Well, when you attend a World Cup, usually what we see are the top 20 climbers. Wait, can you shortly, or just as long as you want, explain how the ranking gets created and when do you know how to start?
So start in terms of like when
time-wise.
Okay. The start list is randomized.
For the whole qualification?
Yeah, so every qualification, the lead start list is randomized. So you could be last, you could be first.
Okay, cool.
And so it's just a matter of dealing with what comes. But you also don't have to go into isolation for lead World Cup. So if the competition starts at 9 and I'm not climbing till 2 in the afternoon, then I just stay in my hotel room until then. Bouldering is a bit of a different story because sometimes isolation might close at 5 in the morning. And there have been times where isolation is closed at 5 and then I'm not climbing until 3 in the afternoon. So you step into a room or a series of rooms with at times like 160 other athletes. Everyone's just trying to like sleep and conserve their energy. And then as the climbing starts, the room clears and it's like a little bit easier to move around and you start warming up. And so time doesn't really feel like it's passing too slowly because it's not too long until you feel like you have something that you need to be doing. But yeah, it can definitely, if you don't know how to manage that time very well, like especially if it's one of your first World Cups, it's really easy to get in there and get amped and get psyched. Then you've been psyched and amped for 6 hours and it's time to climb. And so that's obviously not very, very efficient. Yeah, so you have to like learn how to stay relaxed in isolation. Obviously, with the boulder rankings, so the world ranking dictates where you start. So if you've placed in the top 30 in any World Cup over the last 12 months, you'll have points, and then they rank you on your points, and the climbers with points will come out first. So once you've gotten points, it's a little bit easier to keep your points because you come out to cleaner holds, often like better temperature conditions and that sort of thing. And there's definitely climbers who come out at the end and perform really well on the boulders, but I don't think anyone could doubt that like the first 10 climbers especially are like getting fresh boulders, sharp holds, like really, really good conditions.
Warm up, can you describe for our viewers who haven't been to a World Cup isolation? I know what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know what it looks like, what a warm up wall looks like, and who you have to fight to get onto the warm up wall.
Sometimes all you'll have is like maybe a 15 meters across little home style bouldering wall, 3 meters tall, maybe if you're lucky. So yeah, you really do have to fight for space, and considering for bouldering you're trying to work on like committing dynamic movements and like getting that execution perfect like before you step out to the wall. It can be really intimidating, like trying not to land on the other competitors and trying not to have one of the competitors land on you. And yeah, you really are fighting for wall space and floor space, and not only that, but like trying not to like A, become intimidated by the climbers that are around you, or B, trying to compete with the climbers around you within the warm-up zone before you even step out onto the wall. Like one of the first pieces of advice that James gave me before I went over to my first World Youth Championship was not to get sucked into the warm-up games. People will start competing, like who can dead hang a hold for the longest, who can do however many one-arm pull-ups, or like fighting really hard to beat each other on the warm-up boulders and then step out to the competition itself, and they're already tired, and so there's so many mental aspects that you have to manage before you even get to the comp wall. You know that's something you're going to have to deal with, and after you've done a few World Cups especially, you start to realize that none of that even remotely translates to what's going to happen on the wall. It's all a different game. Once you have that 5-minute timer on, and you've got a boulder before you that you've never seen, and holds you've never seen, and it all changes.
For the Boulder World Cups, do you think the qualification boulders, semi-finals, whatever, the boulders are within your climbing capabilities, within your abilities, you just need to get better and quicker?
Yeah, I think it really varies from boulder to boulder. In the recent World Cups in China, for instance, all of the boulders were doable, and they were easier World Cup rounds for sure. Everything was doable, and maybe it is a mental game, or if not a mental game, you have to get stronger so you can make the possible faster.
Yeah.
So, sometimes there are boulders that I step out to where I think, okay, even if that was my best climbing, I wasn't going to send that in 5 minutes. But that's true for everybody, of course. All the way up to the top of the field, there are boulders that never see completion across a round. Bouldering often feels like a mental game, and it is, but at the same time, you have to have the capacity to not only minimize the mistakes that you make, but when you do make mistakes, to control them and execute them anyway, essentially. If you hit a hold not quite right, and you're strong enough to hold it anyway, you're going to be able to get to the top of the boulder, as opposed to somebody has to execute everything absolutely perfectly if they plan to get a top.
So we already know that the lead facilities are not world class. What about bouldering? The bouldering was booming over the last couple of years. More and more gyms started here in Australia. And how does bouldering training go for you? How does it work?
I definitely think it's getting easier and easier to practice World Cup style boulders nationally. There are a lot of gyms that are getting behind the European boom and a lot of the new trends within the gyms, and naturally that lends itself to a more competition style. I think that's what people see on the live stream, and that's what people want to see in their gyms. The difficulty and the level of the boulders still isn't quite there. I confidently know that I can step into almost every gym in the country and if not send all the boulders in one go, in one session, 2-3 maximum, whereas overseas there are boulders that I'll have to definitely work on for a lot longer, and I think having access to the intensity of the boulders is definitely helpful. But we've got all the facilities that you need to make it work. Maybe you have to be a little bit more creative, maybe you have to kind of hop between gyms a little bit more, but I think that all in time lend itself to seeing more and more successful Australian athletes on the circuit.
Did you ever consider moving to Europe for better training and competition conditions?
Absolutely. When I was younger, it was always the plan. And I think to a degree it's still in the realm of possibility for me, as something I might do in the future, but spending more time in Europe, I realize how much I have at home that I love, that I don't want to leave behind just yet. And so for my climbing, being in Europe is the best thing, but then for my social and mental health and being so far away from home, I think there are climbing is maybe the most important thing, but it's not the only important thing. So I don't think at this stage in my life I'm ready to move to Europe and live in Europe full time, but definitely spending these extended periods of time over there is well within what I'm capable of and what I want to do, and I'm going to, for the foreseeable future, stick with that, spending that extended time, and then maybe in the future moving there if it feels more plausible.
Okay, tell me, how can you afford all this stuff? How much is Australia, the Climbing Federation, supporting you, and what are you doing on your own?
So financially, we're all self-funded or funded by our own sponsors, our own workplace. There isn't any financial support that directly puts us onto the wall for the competitions. So I work at a climbing gym, routesetting, coaching, answering phones, sweeping floors, all that sort of stuff. I live with my parents still, and immensely supportive of what I do, and I just couldn't do it without them. And so that definitely helps me accrue the savings that I need to get overseas for the lengths of time that I do, and go to the places that we do, because the World Cup isn't exactly run on a budget. Having to go to countries like Switzerland and France, those are kind of, I'm lucky enough to have support from gyms like Bayside Rock where I work and Urban Climb, and so that makes things makes training more affordable. Yeah, and I've got my sponsors as well, which support me in the way of gear, but also financially, and provide me with opportunities to pursue further sponsorship and financial support as well, which has been really helpful. But mostly it's just a matter of being really disciplined.
Can you say just a rough number, like how much money do you spend, or do you have to spend? It's not like, oh, I'm willing to spend all this money. It's more like, how much money do you basically spend on just a little bit? If not, then we
no.
Take it up.
It's funny. I try not to think about it too in depth because it stresses me out. World Cup season for me can be like $10,000 to $15,000, I would say. I've been lucky that I've managed to do it quite cheaply in the past. Some people seem to have more trouble and spend a lot more money than I would say that I do pursuing the World Cups.
Okay, let's talk Olympic Games. I think this is why you still compete. Why is it like your big goal? And what changed?
For a long time after its announcement, I didn't consider myself as somebody who was pursuing the Olympics. I think up until maybe this year, I was not pursuing the Olympics. I always wanted to be a lead World Cup climber. I wanted to win a lead World Cup from the time I was 15 years old, for my first international competition. That was what I wanted to do. Should my intrinsic motivation change based on the extrinsic motivation of media pressure and sponsor pressure and pressure from the people around me to pursue the Olympic dream? And I think as time's gone by, I have warmed up a lot more to the idea of competing in the Olympics, and I do consider it one of my big goals. Or it'd be a little bit ridiculous to completely pass up the opportunity, and I'd hate to lose out on that spot knowing that I hadn't given everything. I know that when the Continental Championships come up and it comes down to the wire on who's going to take that Olympic spot, if someone else was to claim that spot and I hadn't given my everything to do the same, I would feel a lot of regret. I think I still have somewhat specialization to lead climbing. When I think of my goals for the year, I think of my performances in the lead World Cups, because that is and will always be the most important thing to me, because that's what drew me to competition climbing in the first place. But yeah, the Olympics is just an opportunity that I couldn't pass up, and being in such a privileged position, having a comparatively small field in which to qualify.
So the transfer from bouldering to lead is something you did before. How's speed going? What's your time?
Oh, no, my time's not fast enough.
So what's your time at speed now?
My goal time is to be under 8 seconds, and I'm not there yet. It's coming along. It's really, really different for me. I've always struggled with the coordination aspects of climbing, and so even with bouldering, I find that really difficult. It's something I have to spend a lot of time on, and with speed even more so. Even though it's rehearsed movement, it's still so many different elements to think about all at once, and so wrapping my head around that has taken some time. And I definitely feel now I'm at the stage where I've got all the basics of speed climbing down, and it's just about fine-tuning all of the elements. But when in actual fact, that's a really, really large and ever-growing process, really.
How does your training week look like? Just quickly, Monday till Friday? Or you're still climbing Saturday? Monday till Sunday?
I climb Sunday, Monday... I climb Sunday, Monday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And those are just made up of fingerboarding sessions, bouldering sessions, board climbing sessions, endurance sessions, and then there's also like conditioning sessions, yoga and running, and of course speed climbing as well. I train, most of my training days I will do at least 2 sessions.
Any given day you always do some kind of sport?
I try to, yeah. Sometimes you just need, whether mentally or physically, sometimes you just need the rest. But I think there's always some kind of like active recovery you can be doing. And it's important not to push active recovery too far as well. See, active recovery is like getting onto the wall and only trying a few hard boulders. Like, I think that being mobile and moving around on a rest day is going to help you recover better than just sitting around and watching YouTube videos, which I'm guilty of as well.
Will you compete in speed this year? The World Championships maybe?
Yes, so I'm going to be doing 3 Speed World Cups and the World Championships as well. So my first speed competition is going to be in Switzerland, July 3rd, I think it is.
How many ways are there to climb the speed route?
Oh, an infinite number of possibilities almost. I think it all comes down, most of it comes down to like body shape, body size, but there are different variations based on like how much power you have.
Or what maybe only a few people know, I think for Australians it's kind of like the easiest to qualify maybe for the Olympic Games.
Basically there's 20 spots, 20 men, 20 women. There are spots allocated for the World Championships, spots allocated for a specific selection event in France, and there are also spots, there's a spot allocated for Japan, there's a wildcard spot, and then there's the continental champion spots. And so yeah, the European champion, Asian champion, and for Australia that's the Oceania continental champion.
Next year in April, I think they're in Villawood as well, as far as I know.
That's what I've heard. Is it'll be in Sydney at the end of April, so quite close to the Olympics, which are in August, from my understanding. So pretty quick turnover. Yeah, so I'd say it's between us or the African Continental Championship, as far as like the easiest way to qualify for the Olympics. There's just less people vying for the spot.
Yeah, doesn't really matter. It's Olympic Games, so we need like the goal is always to have people from around the world. Otherwise, it's not fair.
Absolutely.
Who are your competitors?
Obviously, I don't want to like leave anyone out. I think there are a number of people going for the Olympic spot. The men's field could really be anyone on any given day. I get asked often, "Are you going to the Olympics?" I'm like, "Well, I hope so, but." It really could come down to anything. It's going to come down to the setting on the day, whether someone false starts on the speed route or slips or whatever it might be. Like there are so many factors that are going to come together to decide who takes that spot. Yeah, and that's something that people overseas will ask me, because they'll see me in the Lead World Cups like performing to a reasonable capacity, and they're like, "Oh, but like surely you'll be going because there's no one else." I'm like, no, there are other people. There are men in Australia who are World Cup strong, but we just don't see them on the international stage as much, and so it's just as likely that it'll be one of them who go to the Olympics as it is that I'll be going to the Olympics, or James, like someone who's more recognised on the circuit.
Do you think Australia will end up with 2 spots for the women? Oceania, for example, she could qualify World Championships or in Toulouse, so the winner Australian Continental Championships could go to Olympic Games as well. So 2 Australian women.
Yeah.
Do you say yes or no?
This has been a hot topic. She's a close friend of mine, so I would like to say yes. I think that she has the capability to qualify through one of the events, whether it be World Championships or Toulouse. And I think there are, without a doubt, a number of other Australian and New Zealand women who are hoping that she does, because it opens up the qualifications for one of them to take the continental spot. So yeah, I say there is a likelihood that we could have 2 female Australians in the Olympics.
Let's take a look into the future. Climbing 2024 gets split into 3 categories. Will you still be competing for the Olympic Games?
Yeah, I think it's 2 categories.
2?
Yeah, so they're doing a lead boulder combined, and they're doing a speed, which is interesting.
Yeah, let's put it like this. This is interesting. I have to read about this.
Yeah, so 2024, I would like to be my plan is to still be competing at that stage. And I'm excited having an Olympic format that kind of like tailors to my abilities a little bit and tailors to my passion within the sport. Speed climbing is fun, but it's not where I'm passionate. It's not something that I think I would be doing regularly if I didn't feel it was necessary to achieve the goal of Olympic qualification. So I'm definitely excited about the 2024 Olympics, and I hope to be in even better shape than I am now.
Just one more question. What's easier, the transition from boulder to lead or lead to boulder?
I think it's from bouldering to lead. I think so. I think you have to have that like base of movement and power, and you can add the endurance on. Whereas if the focus has always been on endurance, like power comes a little bit more slowly. But I think we're seeing climbers move quite successfully in both directions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Campbell, and yeah, good luck on the next World Cups,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
hopefully towards the Olympic Games.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. Okay, bye. See you later.